doing already?
Oh yeah. Sorry, spacing out. The music that I play is essentially the music that became American rock and roll. So that's early country blues and early country music, gospel music, and a few other traditional forms that would have come, up through Appalachia, out of what's now the UK, Scotland, Ireland, places like that. I got interested in the technical aspects of recording because I wanted to figure out how to make records that sounded like the record I heard in my head, And so I wanted to know why a Rolling Stones record sounded the way that it did, and why a Neil Young record sounded the way that it did. And I started reading and trying to get a handle on some of those things. There's an engineering magazine in the States called Tape Op. Tape Op was the nickname of the tape operator, which was the first job you'd get when you went to the studio. You would just press play and stop, which sounds like an easy job, but it actually means you have to pay very close attention. So the tape op could screw everything up if they didn't start the tape and the band was just starting to get going, So Tape Op was a great magazine for telling you how a record was made and what technology they used, and also what method they used, right? So I read an interview with Elliot Mazer, who produced Harvest for Neil Young, and he said they didn't add any reverb to anything until post-production, which is why that record sounds so very clean and very, what he describes as literal. It's a very literal recording. Or for another example, one of my favorite Neil Young records is an album called American Stars and Bars. And I saw a picture of it, and he's standing directly in front of the drummer, and the backup singers are right next to him. I was trying to figure out how they did that. Well, it turned out they had monitors on the floor, just like they were on stage. And normally you would be worried about running a signal into a mixing board, back through a monitor, pushing it out to yourself, because it's going to go back into the microphones and create feedback. But if you're careful about what you're doing, there's good bleed and bad mic bleed. So when you have good bleed, it actually reinforces and sort of thickens the sound and makes it more dimensional. So that's pretty a useful trick, and it allows you to have that natural feeling that you have when you're playing like a rock band. If I had to rank the ways that I want to listen to music, my favorite is to have a vinyl LP and put it on the turntable and put it on very loud. So the turntable in my house lives in the dining room. It's an old house, and the dining room is the central room, and all the other rooms lead off, right? And so you can almost use the dining room like a speaker cabinet itself, right? So I'll turn it up real loud in the dining room with nobody home, and then I'll go do something in the house, and I'll be able to hear it from some distance. And that's a nice way to listen to music. I also like to listen to music when I'm driving, and I do a lot of that. And I feel like when I make records, I try to make records that are the sort of record you want to listen to in the car. They're good for driving, right? They're good for a long stretch of time where you become sort of meditative. So those are my favorites. I have a little cassette deck in the barn at my house, and if I'm working outside, then I like to listen on the cassette deck, which probably for sort of sentimental reasons. I just enjoy the sound of tape. It's a good, clean sound. It's honest, and there's a strange shimmer that happens on analog stuff that you don't hear on digital stuff. Digital becomes very cold. It loses some warmth, If a analog recording of tape is like a painting, right? A digital recording is like a photograph through a screen door, right? It's broken up into all these tiny, tiny little pieces, and you can hear the loss of information if you're paying attention. I actually just bought a Tascam 4-track from the 80s, a digital cassette recorder with four inputs. And that's what I used when I was in university to demo the first few songs that I wrote when I was a teenager still. And I liked that way of working, and it's like having it's like having a blackboard, but those tracks are salvageable, and you know, you can dump them into digital format in the studio and make them the basis of a recording. And it allows you to be experimental, because in the studio you're paying for your time, and you have to do what you know how to do. And if you're at home and you're not worrying about the clock, then you can be very, you know, you can just keep fooling around with your pedal board until you make a crazy sound that you never heard before, and you record it, and now you can play it back, and now you can make it the basis of something. I do that when I'm writing, but I don't always do it, with a few exceptions, I don't do it in the studio. So I look forward to screwing around a little bit more at my own house and then taking stuff to the studio. Yeah. All right, Blood Brothers. If I saw you, would you know my name? If I saw you, would you know my name? I used to know you, I used to be your man. Lovers in the traveling time. Blood brother, back when you were mine. Do you remember I was your Valentine? You wanted what I couldn't give you. You would have stayed to hold on to what we had. How could I know that I would live through my life haunted by your sad, your sad smile? Sometimes I hold you in my dreams at night. I never told you, it never seemed right. I'll meet you somewhere on the other side. And if I saw you, would you know my name? If I saw you, would you know my name? If I saw